will. I'll put that in.
Okay, we're back on Streetbeat. This is the sort of last segment of the day. The voice is coming from the right. It's Martin. Got Justine over there on the left. She's the panel operator today. And opposite is Mariko. And we're going to continue on with our discussion about First Nation people. Then we're going into our segment on Eyes and Ears, which is about what we've been reading, watching and listening to.
Oh, we're back on. Oh, no, sorry. Still got the breast station breaks.
Oh, station break?
Yeah, but we're getting close.
And my thing's crooked.
Oh,
just get
Yep.
Is that it?
They are
Yeah, I
very
think that's
loud,
right.
your earphones now.
Yeah, I think I noticed they were pretty loud. Yeah.
Yeah,
Is that better?
Yeah, it's quite loud.
Is that better?
Yeah, if you turn it down a little bit
How many
more.
seconds to go?
Oh, it's loud.
Oh, no, there's still a couple more things.
Okay.
Is that still too loud?
Yeah, I think it needs to be lower, much lower, yeah. Oh, not that low. Yeah,
That's good.
It's hard to know,
I turned
isn't
it
it?
right down.
Neil,
and then
you're not
back
seeing this, Neil, okay? Us trying to get this right.
Yeah, Neil, it's okay. Station's in good hands. Martin, put that fire out.
I don't say that. I've done my emergency training this week. Very scary.
No, I'm kidding. It's all good. Nothing's happening untoward in the studio. So Neil's having a heart attack right now.
What time would it be? It'd be 3 hours ahead. He'd be in karaoke.
Singing Flight the Concord songs.
So you haven't finished your book to talk about?
I'm still reading the same book as I was reading last
Do
week.
you remember the one you mentioned before, the ones in Southern Carolina?
The Crawdad Sing.
Jenny had that. It was on a bed.
Where the Crawdads
She read it
Sing.
and Ali read it too. They
Yeah,
loved it. They
it's
read
been,
it.
it's was on the New York Times bestseller
Yeah.
list for weeks and weeks, or months, I think.
Yeah.
And really popular. It was a light read. I just thought I would. It was. All right, 30 seconds.
You want me to? You, me?
I don't mind. Do you want to come back in?
Because I want to wrap up Penny's thing. Okay.
Mm.
It's crooked. I've got to. We're all on an angle.
Do you want me to fix it? Do you want me to run around and fix it?
Doesn't matter. You sort of.
I'll do it.
I don't think it'll fix.
Oh, like you have to actually.
Welcome back to Triple H 100.1 FM on the Streetbeat program. Minus Neil with Justine, Martin and Mariko. I hope you enjoyed that little segment called On the Run with Streetbeat. We would like people in the local community, if they're interested in spending 6 minutes with myself or Justine or Mariko, just to share what you're doing with your busy life, because I think it's nice to hear that.
Is there a way that people could reach out if they're interested in being involved?
Well, they could probably try and contact us directly. We're pretty accessible on Facebook, but I'm sure you could contact
through the Streetbeat Facebook page.
Yep.
That's right, Streetbeat on Triple HFM. If you go to the Facebook page and leave us a message or messages.
Or if you see us around, I guess you can always just ask us in person.
Yeah, with Dr. Google, just put our names in and you will find us. That is for sure. If we've got time, Justine and Mariko, I wouldn't mind just following up the conversation we had with Mariko before we had the news break at 5 o'clock, which was a while ago actually now, 25 past.
Time flies.
Time flies. Let's unpack a bit more all that discussion we had on Welcome to Country.
Yeah. So just following on what we were talking about, difference between acknowledgement. So we talked about difference between acknowledgement and welcome, and when it's appropriate to do, either, but both of them really. And I have to get right close to the microphone. Yeah, I'm getting the frantic hand gestures from
That's
Justine.
right, moving a little bit too far away.
Yeah, I keep on fiddling around with it too, so sorry about that, because just trying to get it close enough. So, yes, I think the other thing to remember too is welcome to country. It's like, it is a two-way thing. I know a common comment about welcomes to country is about, it's just tokenistic. What does it mean? Is it actually going to do anything good? What's the benefit of doing it other than making people feel like they're doing something? And so I think that needs to be addressed because, I think it's just about what people come into, what investment they give into it. So obviously if you're just doing it in a bit of a half effort, and you just don't really mean the words, you're just doing it because your boss made you do it, or it's just in your meeting protocols. I mean, obviously, what's the impact of that? And but no, if you genuinely, just think about it and reflect upon why you're doing it, and I mean, the whole thing about the welcome to country thing, about what does it mean, why is it important to say, because it's about acknowledging the traditional owners of this land, so always was, always will be Aboriginal land, and just thinking about the protocols that have been in place for tens of thousands of years. And I think it comes back to, if you want people to understand why it's significant, just think about, well, if you're in your home and someone comes in, you welcome them. You just say, you know, it's a way of like, you know, respectful encounters. Like, you wouldn't have someone just barge into your house.
So is it part of truth-telling? Is it?
It is a part of truth-telling. I would interpret it as, because that's something that Martin and I, we've been following with the Statement from the Heart and the Federal Parliamentary Inquiry, and one of the comments about defining truth-telling, because it's such a big topic, and people are like, what does truth-telling actually mean? What can we do local level in truth-telling? And doing an acknowledgement and organising, booking someone in to do a welcome to country, that's a form of truth-telling, because you're truth-telling about your local area and about the people who have been here. Yeah, so it's part of truth-telling. But it's a two-way thing. So if you hear a welcome to country or, you know, acknowledgement, you need to remember it's about following protocol. So like, it's not just about them welcoming. You have to follow law. So that's why I think a lot of people in community get a bit, they get a bit like disillusioned about welcomes, because you have a welcome done, an elder will come in and say, you know, welcome you to my country. And then after that, like, law's broken because there's still that systemic racism at play, you know, racist comments, or, you know, people still kind of perpetuating those stereotypes about Aboriginal people, disrespecting country as well, not following law. And so you just kind of wonder, well, that's where you can go into that whole thing about tokenism, where, like, if you're not really feeling it, you're
talking about before crossing the line, and by no sense of any imagination at all, I've crossed the line into the space of understanding completely Indigenous populations. But what I have found quite clearly is that the welcome country experience elicits an emotional response from me, because it's not authentic. What's the word? It's genuine.
Genuine and respectful, appropriate,
so if it's going to be done, it needs to be done in a way that's not tokenistic. So I just think it's very powerful, and I think I've learned a lot, Mariko, so thank you for sharing your skills.
And it's just something people need to remember, is like, you need to follow law as well, and just about following the customs. So it's not just about the words, it's more about, like, your actions, about, you know, caring for country and acknowledging your role as a custodian as well, you know, looking after places. So
what does that look like, caring for country?
Caring for country could be something as simple as, you know, you see some rubbish on the ground, even though you know very well it's not your rubbish, you pick it up anyway. It doesn't matter. Like, I do that on the trains. If I see something rolling around, like a bottle or a packet on the ground, I prefer just to pick it up, because I just don't like rubbish lying around. And so that's a little way of doing caring for country. I mean, an example is Clean Up Australia Day. I think that's a way that a lot of communities get involved, if really beautifying their area and helping to just clean up our land and waterways a bit. So there's all these different ways. Another way is having the conversations about respecting Indigenous knowledges on fire and land management. So obviously that's a big conversation, national conversation we're having now, following the devastating bushfires across New South Wales, Queensland and Victoria quite recently. And so I think the element there of caring for country is, recognising Aboriginal, knowledge and their place as, custodians of this land for 60,000+ years. And, that involves, recognising sovereignty of Aboriginal people on this land.
So that's a conversation that is very long overdue, isn't it? But do you think we're making real progress now?
Yes, but I do wonder if some of that's reactionary. I mean, I'd love it to be proactive, and where people don't feel like they're being forced to do these things. Like, they don't feel like they have to feel forced to do acknowledgement as a country where their heart's not quite in it. And with the current bushfire scenario, like, seeing Indigenous knowledge as like the backup plan, that's something I feel get a feeling of, where it's like, now when all these devastating bushfires have happened, why didn't we think about cool burning techniques that Aboriginal people have been using, and then bringing people in now to deal with country that's already been quite damaged, and the fact that the landscape is quite different because it's urbanised and built up, and so it's it can become quite disingenuous in that sense. But look, I'm happy to see anything as sort of progress and a step forward. So I think there's more people who are, just getting up with the program on it.
Mariko, one of the recent meetings I was at, I was listening to the turn of phrase, the language and words are important. We discussed that earlier with my misuse of the word.
No, not at all. I mean, it's just language is such a powerful thing. So I think I've talked on previous programs about, like, if we're talking about things like frontier wars, the terminology, like, people use frontier conflict, but frontier wars and wars doesn't include just violence. There's a lot of things about language that
That's right.
can go on other times,
And in this meeting I was at, there were 3 turns of phrase that I just really caught my attention, and I actually didn't forget them and wrote them down afterwards, which was pretty impressive for me because I normally forget things pretty quickly if I hear them. The first, I'll share the 3 of them with you. I would love either of your comments on them. One is, it's not about reconciliation but reconciling in action. So I'd like you to sit with that just for a sec, that one. It's not about reconciliation but reconciling in action. That was very powerful for me. The second one is, we are part of a disruption and are finding our way back. We are part of a disruption and we are finding our way back. And the third one is, we are in a continual cycle of change which has been going on for thousands of years. And I actually had a list of about 4 or 5 other ones as well. I'd love any comments or thoughts on those 3 quotes.
Yeah, I think I can offer some feedback on each one of those. So, I mean, the first one, it really touches like what I just said about the issue at the moment, seeing Indigenous knowledges as being used as a bit of a backup plan. Like, I mean, the word reconciliation, I've been asking people this question for some time now, is what does reconciliation actually mean? Like, you can get the dictionary meaning of it, but what does it mean in application in regards to relationship between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and the non-Indigenous European descended population? I have issue with the re part of it because it's like reconciliation. Was there conciliation in the first place? Should we be talking about conciliation rather than reconciliation? That's one aspect. The other aspect that I hear a lot in the Aboriginal community is, why is the the responsibility, and it's seen as a burden as well, of Reconciliation Week and running the events and the job of reconciling, it seems to fall squarely on Indigenous people, whereas like we need to come up with events for Reconciliation Week, which is late May to early June. We're the ones who ask to do acknowledgements. We have to organise morning teas and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, what do we as Aboriginal people need to reconcile within ourselves? Like we are pretty sure of ourselves, and it's more like the non-Indigenous people need to reconcile with their history. And so, I think that's something that I think the reconciliation in action, I think it's not just I wasn't sure, inaction or inaction, like that's the one word.
Action. It was not in action, no, it's actually through action.
Through action. Yeah, I think it comes down, like I was saying, moving beyond tokenism. So, making sure you're doing it by your actions and you actually, feeling it and meaning it, not just saying words on a page. And it's like in actions as well. So when you hear someone saying a racist joke, you pull them up on it. You say, no, that is unacceptable to be talking about Aboriginal people in that way. That's a stereotype. It's offensive. It's not correct. Or like some of the myths that go around about, Aboriginal people, they're all, this and that and the other. I don't want to repeat them. And so you pull people up on that. It's like what we do. Like we talk, you, Martin, you've been on a journey about learning about the local Aboriginal heritage and history of the area, and the fact that you actually talk about it in like normal conversations. You're not just reserving the conversation for, we're only going to talk about the Aboriginal stuff in Reconciliation Week or NAIDOC or around 26th of January. Like, you can kind of weave it into conversations where you go. So that's the thing. Yeah.
Because that's what I think. I think we've had this conversation previously, but when you go to New Zealand, the Maori culture is so integrated in it with the culture of the entire population.
People speak language too. Yeah.
And it feels something, as a non-Indigenous person, I feel that I would like to be proud and to celebrate the fact that I live in a country where the oldest living culture still exists, and that I would like to share that. But I guess the challenge for me is to share it in a respectful way.
and I think because I always reflect on the example of New Zealand and thinking, oh, people learn about Māori culture and really proud of that heritage of the country, and I feel in comparison, like my opinion with Australia, like I think this is something that Stan Grant, he recently wrote an article responding to that High Court decision we spoke about last week, and he mentioned a bit about like that there seems to be like this sort of shame in like people don't want to talk about the Aboriginal side, like there's sort of like, oh, they're kind of the uncomfortable truth in our history, whereas like people don't really feel proud of us, and it's a real shame because there's a lot of great things happening in our communities, and there seems like people feel uncomfortable, and it might be because of the history and the way our history has been dealt
shameful.
with.
That's right, but it is shameful. But I think we need to
like
acknowledge
an uncomfortable,
that, don't we?
inconvenient, like especially when you're looking at like land rights and that, where I think there's, it seems like people just rather Aboriginal people not around.
But it is shameful, the history, but we need to acknowledge that. But there is also much
And that's
to
the
celebrate.
reconciliation part.
That's right, much to celebrate. It's interesting.
Well, that's why NAIDOC is about celebrating the achievements of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. I mean, this sort of thing should be happening every week. Like, same with reconciliation. Why do we leave it to these token weeks?
Maybe it'll change. One of my children just started university this week, and she's doing Aboriginal studies as part of her first year university curriculum. And she's very fortunate to, her lecturer is actually an Indigenous man. And he said he was reciting when he was at school for NAIDOC week, or he'd be trotted out as the token Indigenous person. And she was quite shocked by that. So hopefully the generation that's coming through now will be much more informed about the history, will be much more, they'll understand the atrocities that happened in the past.
And I think that's happening again. I go back to my comment about reactive, like, especially now with what's happening with our environment, and there's, it feels like a reckoning has come on, and people are reflecting upon that, and I think now we are kind of forced to consider different ways of existing on this ancient land. I think it's something that more and more it's going to be part of the conversation. I just want to see more Indigenous First Nations peoples brought to the table. Like, they need to be at the decision tables on these matters, not just referred to sort of second hand. So that's, I think, the key difference is not just talking about us, but having us as part of that sort of conversation.
Thank you for your nice comments about me trying to understand what's going on. They're very meagre in comparison.
It's great. I mean, I want more Martins in the community.
So what I've learned from this is, particularly the meeting I went to, is it can be very time consuming, because I'm just so impressed with the level of respect. When this particular meeting I had 3 aunties and 1 uncle there, and they were all speaking openly and allowing everyone to speak. And it was within the confines of a sort of a Western democratic meeting structure. And naturally you're not going to get through all the items, because through the respectful process of the First Nations people, people tell stories.
Yep.
And the stories that were, I must admit, I was sitting there riveted, just listening and observing the meeting. It was probably one of the only meetings where I was a listener rather than a participant. But I just think we've got so much to learn from that point of view, where we just need to take time and listen and be in peace and in space with what happens.
It's about active listening. So, like with learning about Indigenous ways of knowing, and like that's something that's part of my personal story, but also professionally through my PhD research and looking into Indigenous methodologies. You really have to put yourself into sort of that Indigenous, ways of knowing, being and seeing the world, and active listening and reciprocity, respect. That's all a big part and parcel of it. And I think a rule of thumb is talking to community. It's actually much more important just to listen. Even if you end up not saying that much, that's actually probably the safer and more appropriate approach, where I think maybe it's a Western thing where we're just so used to like talk. We have a right to have the floor. That's not always the case. And the same thing about knowledge. Like, we don't have a right to know everything, where I think the way the Western knowledge system is framed is like, oh, the knowledge is out there. We all want to learn more about, that our sense of completeness is about how much we know about the world. Like, general knowledge, people having really high knowledge of, it's like all those quiz shows and game shows. You're basically valued on the amount of knowledge you can hold in your brain. Where in a lot of Indigenous communities, I can't speak for all of them beyond my own local Aboriginal community, I suppose. But like, it's about there's open knowledge, closed knowledge, knowledge that only certain people who've gone through like initiation and particular processes to gain that knowledge, and so we don't have a right to know everything. But yeah, it's always important just to listen and take the cues from the person you're speaking to, and particularly if you're talking to a senior, like an elder, senior cultural knowledge holder, let them be the ones who drive the conversation and let them ask you questions and you respond. But yeah, it's all about just paying that respect, listening.
Well, all I can say, Mariko, is you need to book your babysitter for every Friday.
I will try my best. Yeah, we can change that promo to more regular Mariko. Yep.
Okay, well, we're going to take a break to listen to our station supporters, and then we'll be back with our Eyes and Ears segment.
Great, good timing.
Oh, that was so good.
Oh, sorry about the
that
mic. I'm sorry about the mic because I was trying to keep in the frame, and then
I changed it around over there, so it was alright.
I think I was going to cover this
You
one,
don't
but look,
have
I
to
think
really
we've already
touch it,
talked about
because
it.
what I wanted to do was just read them
Yeah.
for people, and I wanted to do it slowly so they could think about it. And you just touched on one where you wanted to. We can't cover everything.
No.
But they were powerful. That's huge. That one.
Well,
We are
that's
part of a
really
disruption.
disruption is colonisation, and it's like it's a topic that
Yeah.
I think it's so huge, and it is a polarising topic.
Yeah.
So I don't know where listen, just.
But even the words, it's just it's the diplomacy of the
Do we want to
words.
just let a song? We'll just go to a song?
Yeah.
Yeah.
John Farnham.
Johnny Farnham.
Shall we put that up? I'll move that up.
That's freedom.
Yeah. Okay.
So no, disruption, I mean, that's referring to colonisation, which is ongoing. It's not just what happened 250 years ago. Cycles of change. It's talking about our resilience.
Is there any implication of that statement in relation to what we're dealing with now?
Continuous cycle. Yeah, I mean, it's...
So that when I heard that, I thought there was almost like a little something there in that.
Yeah, because I mean, you could look at it from like a scientific point of view, but also just about like the changes that's been happening over the last 200 years about like industrialisation, urbanisation, just the way we've been using country. I just think country's been exploited and taken advantage of, and I think now, like I said, we're in a time of reckoning.
So when we were talking about meso and microcycles,
oh, okay.
Do you think maybe it needs to be thought about a bit more like that?
Yeah, what is meso?
Just like large scale, small scale.
Oh yeah, because obviously there's bigger things that impact.
So the industrial cycle is the one we're in the last, which is microcosmic. 200 years.
Yes.
For everyone. Who's going first with Eyes and
I'm
Ears?
just going to introduce it and lead it, but I haven't got anything particularly.
I've got heaps
interesting.
actually, because I've got
Yeah,
three
well, I'll let you
aspects
two
I can
just.
do. So
I'll come up with something more interesting.
I know we're
next week.
trying to end. We're
I'm
running
still
close to
reading
time.
Damascus.
Oh, yeah.
So-
Oh, we want to talk to you.
Yeah,
we'll talk
I
about
know,
that.
I know,
Okay.
but-
All right.
You can
We're
talk
in.
about that.
We'll start
haven't-
with that.
Okay, I've
All right,
still.
we'll start with that because we talked at the front of that, bringing the
We did,
the
but I'm
revolutionary into
only
it.
about a third of the way through. So.
All right, now we'll start with Damascus.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we might have to be a running conversation because
No,
I'm only
that's
up
all
to Okay, yeah, because so was it you that told me to read Damascus about when I was
I was talking about St. Paul.
St. Paul, right?
And
Well,
we
it's
were
about
talking
St. Paul though.
Yeah, it
it's
is,
about
yeah. He's road to
they-
Damascus.
Yeah.
So I forgot to listen to the song. So
Yeah, and that would explain why
Yeah.
Jesus. Why?
So we'll just we'll repeat. That could be your one again.
Okay,
We're gonna
I'll
revisit
start it then. I'll start off. and
I'll ask
say-
you the question. You start the show and I'll ask you the question. I told you so.
Well, we could always come back in. We're at 41. We could
I've got a
good
quote
go.
that I'm going to use. I'm in quote mode at the moment.
Okay.
Rather
All right.
than
Well,
just waffling.
let's
When
fade
I do
this out and go back on.
Let's go
'cause
back
we
on,
don't want
yeah.
to. We've got
oh,
two
not
minutes.
John Farnham. I know we're
Well,
running out of time
you're
for the
all right. We
program.
can go a bit longer. If we're chatting, it's fine.
Oh, they get quite annoying.
That's all right. We say it's Neil's fault.
Okay, well, we can go a bit long, but we'll fade it out. I'll do the fade
Oh, that's
thing.
sacrilege.
Sacrilege, taking Johnny off. Yeah.
All right, ready? Welcome back to Streetbeat with Martin, Mariko and me, Justine. Now we're up to our favourite segment of the show quite often, although we've had some really interesting discussions this afternoon, but this is our Eyes and Ears segment where we get to talk about what we've been reading, watching or listening to for the week.
Well, last week, I'm going to revisit it. I heard a little bit about Damascus, and I remember we were talking about that a few months ago outside after we finished the show, and the whole concept of, the Jesus and the trip and St. Paul and the rest of it. Tell me a
That's
bit more
right.
about
Well,
that.
exactly. Well, I think we've had a similar upbringing, Martin. We both have a Catholic background.
That's right.
And it's my understanding, and I'm no theologian, but Jesus stormed the temple because he was outraged or he was really concerned about the outrageous prices that were being imposed on people wanting to worship. And he was also protesting against the Roman occupation of Palestine. Now that to me is a social justice crusader. That's somebody that's standing up for the marginalised and the poor and the people that were on the fringes of society. So I was somewhat perplexed as to how Jesus had somehow become the poster boy, if you like. I don't know if that's a respectful term, but the poster boy for the right wing, the far right wing lobby, particularly the gun lobby. And I think, Martin, you said to me, read the history of St. Paul, read Damascus. So out I went and I got Damascus. And so I'm ploughing my way through it. And I'm really enjoying it. It's a very, he's a brilliant writer. I find him quite a harsh writer. It's quite confronting. It's very present. The way he, Christoph Sulkus, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, explained things, but absolutely fascinating to date.
Yeah, I think it was Neil who suggested it, and from that we talked about St. Paul and his journeys, and there's a theme here that's flowing through because we've been talking about stories with Indigenous people, First Nations people. That's the thing about when you read the missionary exploration work of St. Paul. That's why I read that, because he's an explorer. There's more to do with the exploring side of it than the religious side of it from my point of view. But it's the stories that are told, and the stories that are told in that space reflect about real human condition, and I think that's why I really enjoyed that little bit I heard of what you said about Damascus last week.
Right, well, this will have to be a running discussion. We'll have to continue
We're
it as
still
I make my
reading it,
way
aren't
through.
you?
I'm still reading it. I'm only about
It'll be like a
the way through.
four-parter.
Four-parter.
It was my ambition to read a book a week this year, and I did meet it in the early part of the year, but then suddenly things catch up with you, don't they? And I don't have as much time as I had initially.
Well, Mariko's sitting here with these
you go.
books here.
There's one. I got a story, so that's all right. You go.
I've come across this book by Sam Cawthorn, Cawthorn, and it's called Story Showing: How to Stand Out from the Storytellers. And that caught my attention, and I just want to read a quote, and that's all I'll leave it for. So I'm in quote reading today, aren't I? A great story will inspire, but inspiration will not necessarily lead to action. That's why the time has come to stop telling the story. Stop saying, listen to what I'm going to tell you, I told you so. Now it's all about showing. Let your story show what you feel, what you've experienced, and what you can offer others. Start saying, hey, can I show you this? Mariko's got her hand up. Let's go.
Well, just what you were saying about listening to the Aboriginal elders, and you were saying about the way that we story tell, I mean, that really speaks to me about what you've just been saying.
It's a great book, and I won't give too much of it away. It's got some things about TED Talk and voice and intonation and all the rest of it. But for
All that
me,
technical stuff.
Yeah, but I've just found it very useful, and it's probably helped me hopefully a bit on here. And I'm very much in story showing phase of my life at the moment.
That's great. Yeah, because we don't have story at schools. They say show and tell or storytelling. We need to be story showing.
But we probably have to define it a bit better. But that was my book for the week. But over to you, Mariko, because you're not often on the show. But what have you been reading and watching?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, in terms of reading, I don't get much time to read fun stuff anymore. So it's more like, I'm trying to get into academic journals. I've got my copy of History Australia, which is Journal of the Australian Historical Association that I'm a member of, and reading books for work. So, like Dark Emu and 1787 and ones like that. But in terms of what I've been seeing, so I talked last week about seeing some great movies, so period ones. So I keep on tapping. Yep. So I saw Little Women and then also Jojo Rabbit. But last weekend I saw Emma. So that's the new period drama that's just come out. It's another adaptation of Jane Austen's novel Emma. And I thought it was really enjoyable, and similar to Little Women, it's kind of updating the story through, I guess, the portrayals of the characters in a way that kind of speaks to us, 200 odd years later. Another thing I wanted to comment on was how great it is that there's Studio Ghibli films showing on, I think Netflix are gradually releasing those movies, so by Miyazaki, and yeah, it's great. And I read a really cool comment on Twitter from someone who works in curation, museum curation like me, and he was saying that it's great hearing more people talking about Studio Ghibli films because they're being more exposed to them through distribution by curation. So the fact that Netflix are curating like a collection of these films, so like, you know, Totoro, and yeah, like they'll have Spirited Away coming out soon. So I think the next bunch of films are coming out, I think this weekend, I've from memory, so it's great. I enjoy watching those with my kids.
I just spotted here, I can see Richard White. He was one of my lecturers at Sydney Uni, just there.
Oh,
from
right.
the thing there. And I saw Frank Bongiorno's there as well from Australian National University. Who was the
Let me have a look too. I'll just have a look at
see
some of
the different things. But what I found interesting there, there's a word there that and I'm going to dovetail back since we've been on First Nation or most of the show now. There's a couple of programs there about coding. What's coding mean? A couple of articles on coding.
Oh gosh, I mean, oh yeah, okay, so about receptions decoded. Mm.
Yeah. It's also, I've heard that come up in the meetings before. Is it's sort of putting some basic language around images and concepts.
Yeah, I think
like
coding's all that semiotics, and I guess I mean, it could go into all these different sort of disciplines and things, but yeah, I guess it's all this academic speak, really. Yeah.
So what are you going to read next, Justine, after you get through to Damascus?
I'm going to read Animal Farm because it's actually the prescribed text for my son who's in Year 10. And I think I was in Year 10 when I last read it.
Oh, me too.
So it was longer ago for me than it was for you, Mariko, so I thought I'd revisit it. But isn't it interesting that a book that was relevant back when I was in Year 10 in 1986, they're still prescribing now as a relevant text. So things, obviously the classics are still relevant. So I'm going to start reading that.
One of the books, probably only 2 books I've ever read from school, and I was in Year 10 in 1976, and a year later was one called, I think it was Stowe, Merry-Go-Round in the Sea. We had to read that. But the one I have revisited a lot is Tree of Man. I really, really like Patrick White's Tree of Man because it's all about country and landscape and things like that. What about you? What books did you read at school?
Well, Emma was one I did, so watching that again like almost 20 years after I studied and I forgot half the storyline. But yeah, it was Animal Farm was one of them.
1984, I did a bit later. Pride and Prejudice, I did for Year 12.
Oh, yeah, did Romeo and Juliet's, a few of the Shakespeare's, and yeah, like so. But yeah, 1984, I saw the funniest T-shirt and someone's had on it, "Make George Orwell fiction again."
I know, that's brilliant. I think that's really brilliant.
Biography, Crick's biography, I think it's good.
Well, that's a wrap for this week. So thank you for joining us. We're going to go out with a song, Closing Time. We've ditched Neil's choice. This is Mariko's choice.
Semisonic, yeah.
That's right.
Great
so
song.
Thank you for joining us.
Karaoke Thursday nights with Mariko.
That's right. We hope
we
hope you'll tune in again next week.
Thank you. It's Martin. Had a great show. Thank you, Mariko and Justine.
Thank you. See you next time. The time.
That's a great song.
Yeah, sorry about the tapping. I got excited.
Thanks, Mariko. That was great.
Oh, thank you very much, Martin. Thanks, Justine.
Thank you.
That was good. No
There you
worries.
go. Oh, hey, me
Thank
too.
you.
Let's kill that live feed.
Let's go listen to the song.
Yeah,
Here you go.
song.
Take your.
Whatever. I'll put
Take
it
the
back
quote
on.
out.
Take that.
Who's calling
All
us?
right.
See you next time, Facebook land.
Cheers.